The Man Who Knew Too Much is a 1956 suspense thriller that was directed and produced by Alfred Hitchcock. It starred James Stewart and Doris Day. The film is Hitchcock's second film using this title. The first film was a 1934 movie of the same name that featured a significantly different plot and script. Hitchcock always said that the first version of this work was from a talented amateur, and the second was made by a professional. The storyline goes that while attending a medical conference in Paris, the American physician Ben McKenna, his wife, who was a retired musical theater actress and singer, Joe McKenna, and their adolescent son Hank decided to take a side trip to, among other places, Marrakesh, French Morocco. With a knife plunged into his back, the Frenchman Louis Bernard, who the family met earlier in their bus ride to Marrakesh and who is now masquerading as an Arab, approaches the doctor and cryptically whispers into Ben's ear that there will be an attempted assassination in London of a statesman. All this is done and whispered to Ben just before Bernard dies. Ben is reluctant to provide any information of this news to the authorities because concurrently their son Hank has been kidnapped by a British couple, Edward and Lucy Drayton, who had also befriended the McKennas in Marrakesh and who had probably taken their son out of the country back to England. Whoever the unknown people are that the Draytons are working for have threatened to kill their son if Ben divulges any information told to him by the dying Bernard. With what limited information they have on hand, Ben and Joe head to London to try to stop the assassination attempt and, more importantly, find alive their son Hank. Scotland Yard is aware of some of the pieces of the puzzle, including the fact that Bernard was a French secret agent and that there will be an assassination attempt on someone. Throughout the filming of the movie, Doris Day became increasingly concerned that Alfred Hitchcock paid more attention to the camera setups, lighting, and technical matters than he did to her performance. She was convinced that he was displeased with her work. She finally confronted him and just asked him about it. His reply to her was, "My dear Miss Day, if you weren't giving me what I want, then I would have to direct you." In this case, the non-direction meant that she was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing in Hitchcock's eyes. At first, Doris Day refused to record Que Sera Sera, dismissing it as a forgettable children's song. It not only went on to win an Academy Award, but also became the biggest hit of her recording career and her signature song. She sang this same song in two more movies, Please Don't Eat the Daisies from 1960 and The Glass Bottom Boat from 1966. It also was used for the theme song of the 124 episodes of her television series, The Doris Day Show, from 1968. It was during the making of this film that she saw how the camels, goats, and other animal extras in the marketplace scene were being treated, and this caused her to make a lifelong commitment to prevent animal abuse. She was just appalled at the conditions that the animals were in, and she refused to do any more work unless they were properly fed and cared for. The production company actually had to set up feeding stations for the various goats, sheep, camels, etc., and feed them every day before Miss Day would agree to go back on the set and start filming again. Now, Doris Day was so popular at that time, especially with the British, that when she arrived at her London hotel for the location shooting there, mobs of fans had gotten word that she was going to be there and staying at that location, and they had gathered waiting for her. Pandemonium just erupted when they saw her, and she needed a police escort to get in the place. Fans continued to surround the hotel, camping out, shouting her name, asking for autographs, and hoping for a chance to see her. Eventually, the hotel management got fed up with it, and they finally asked her to leave so that things could get back to normal. Initially, the script called for a great deal of dialogue at the Royal Albert Hall. Jimmy Stewart was originally to deliver a page-long speech about why they had to stop the concert. But this just didn't go over well with Alfred Hitchcock. He stated that this is too much talking. I'm unable to enjoy the London Symphony. He then told him to not say a word, to just wave his arms and run up the stairs. Hitchcock preferred this way of communicating because he was suspicious of the spoken word. The plot called for a man, who is Daniel Galene, who played the role of Louis Bernard, to be discovered as not being a Moroccan because he was wearing dark makeup. After numerous trials, the makeup artist couldn't find a makeup that would come off easily. Instead, what they did was painted Jimmy Stewart's fingers with a light-colored powder so that he would leave light pale streaks on the actor's skin when he ran his fingers across it. Many of the Moroccan extras had been mistakenly informed that they would only be paid if they were actually visible in the movie. This led to a lot of pushing and shoving to get close up to the camera. The crew eventually explained to them that this was not the case, that they would be paid no matter what. Look closely and you'll see a face you recognize in a London hotel. That face is of Carolyn Jones, who has a small part of a redhead called Cindy Fontaine, who's one of Joe Conway's friends that meets her at the hotel. But she would later play a very different look in the role of Morticia on the Addams Family TV show that ran from 1964 to 1966. Now, the gray suit may look familiar to you too. That suit that Joe wears in the latter part of the movie is not identical to the gray suit that Madeline wears in Vertigo, although it looks an awful lot like it. Josephine's suit is silk and has 6 buttons, where Madeline's suit is wool and it has 5 buttons. The tailoring is also slightly different, and the pockets are not identical either. Now, Alfred Hitchcock always does a little cameo in all of his films. This film contains one of the hardest ones to spot that you'll see of his cameos. He is only seen briefly from behind, standing to the left of Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day when they are watching the acrobats perform in the Marrakesh marketplace. You usually get a frontal view of his face, but in this case, you don't. You just see his back, but you can tell it's him by that oddly shaped bald head. Doris Day had an extreme fear of flying ever since she had been touring with Bob Hope in the 1940s, and she endured some very close calls in terrible weather during that time. She almost turned down this role because the movie required her to travel to London and Marrakesh. Her husband and manager, Martin Melcher, talked her into accepting this role. And speaking of her third husband, he died on April 20th, 1968. And this was a time when Doris Day got shocked to reality when she discovered that he and his business partner, a lawyer named Jerome Rosenthal, had squandered all her earnings, leaving her broke and deeply in debt. Rosenthal had been her attorney since 1949, when he represented her in an uncontested divorce action against her second husband. Day also learned that her husband had committed her to do a television series, something she didn't want to do. He signed for her and bound her to do this television series. It went on to become the Doris Day Show. Doris hated the idea of performing on TV, but she felt obligated to do it. She needed some way to earn a bunch of income to help pay off the debts that had been incurred by her husband. The show was a huge success, and this helped her get back on her feet again after being manipulated by someone that she fully trusted. Take a look at this great Alfred Hitchcock film. It's not one of my favorite Hitchcock films, but it's still pretty good and worth the time watching it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.